Yo, welcome to the show. I'm excited today to talk about brand image, telling your story, sharing who you are with the masses. This is part 2 in my 3-part series about building your brand, a brand that matters. So check it out. Hope you like it. Okay, brand image. Let's dive into it. So today, let's talk about your image. What is that comprised of? How does it work? How do you define that? And where do you go to make that happen? Because it seems like we all have a definition in our heads of what works for brand image. It's the thing that you see when you're out there talking about what a brand is. It's the arches of McDonald's, the Apple logo. It's the friendly faces at a store that you love. But for me, what I want to talk about in terms of getting your image out there is really how do you let other people find you, right? So if you're not findable, then the image doesn't exist. So part of the step, one of the steps you have to take to really building a brand image is making sure you're findable. How can you tell your story in places where people happen to be looking for exactly that thing that you service? So the more niche you can dive down, the more relevant you can be to a specific consumer's search, then the more findable you're going to be, so that when you tell your story, it resonates. So when a lot of bigger companies start to think about their brand image, the first thing they tend to dive into is brand personas, the people, the audience, the mindset, demographics, and they'll try to build out these pictures of who that person is. And I think that's important if you got the money, but for most of us, we're just working with what we have. So I would recommend for small businesses, especially, to just take some time to step back and think about who that consumer is and what do they do? What does the average person do when looking for you? If they type in a search online, what are they finding? If they go to a typical listing for your type of business, are you showing up there? If you are being findable on the web, do you have a website that starts to tell your story? If they're on social media, do you have a page there as well? Can you be everywhere that they happen to be? I think a lot of companies start and don't actually finish the job of being everywhere that they can be, which is funny because that typically is where it's free. A lot of that. There are some paid pieces of that as well, but a lot of that you can do for free. Just a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of effort. Another great place to tap into where your customer journey and how to find your customers is to talk to them. Why don't you ask them, hey, how did you find us? Where do you like to go besides here? What's the other, how do you go about looking for services like this? Get in depth with them and find out what a possible path to your business has been. Maybe you find something that you've never thought of, or maybe it'll reaffirm what you already knew and you should be putting more investment towards that particular channel. Another place to think about your customer in terms of where to find them and how to put that story out there is to use sites like Yelp or review sites in general to listen to conversation. That's good for Twitter too. But basically find places where you're being talked about or brands like yours are being talked about. Be a part of the conversation, or at very least listen to what they're saying. You might also hear in there something that could be a good product change or something you can jump into early on and take advantage of. That's something that they're looking for. You can bring that to your lineup. You never lose if you're listening to your customers. I'd also like to throw out there that if you are a local business, so you are a physical storefront that has a community or neighborhood around it, you have a big advantage too. You have the opportunity to go door to door or business to business, establish relationships. You can focus directly in on your community and make a splash, get involved in the local events that are around, be a voice of the community. The bigger brands out there don't have that opportunity. They have to spread themselves thin to be more appealing to the masses. You actually can go person by person and see what makes sense in terms of gaining awareness and telling your story on a local basis. You can talk about this summer, this thing that's happening and how your business is connected to that. And aside from businesses in your neighborhood, you can think about locally, who are the influencers? What are the news channels that represent your neighborhoods? Who are the people the celebrities, the local influencers, bloggers, reviewers, whether it's a reviewer of local business or food or entertainment. There's someone that might be talking about your exact business that has a reputation. And you can, even if that doesn't reach a lot of people, you can reshare that information on your website to establish credibility. So again, you got to find new ways to tell your story, taking customer input and their testimonials, putting them on your website, sharing them on social. Same thing with these influencers, taking all these voices that have become your advocates and using it as reputational foundation on your image. So your hubs, your website, your listings, your social profiles should be sharing all these great customer responses and giving them something to believe in terms of why it resonates with people just like them. The next thing I want to mention is be relevant. I can't emphasize this enough. Be relevant. If you are in a particular industry, think about who you appeal to the most and what is on their mind. If you're an accountant serving the auto industry, talk about auto issues with taxes that haven't come up yet that they should be thinking about. If you're a financial analyst specifically working with small business owners, talk about what small businesses should be thinking about when monitoring their finances. If you're a pest control company and it's bee season, talk about the bees. It's pretty easy when you start to think about the time of year, so the seasonality, the events going on in the community, or the things happening in your industry that are relevant at that time of year in that specific community. All of those things contribute to relevance because it makes it more real to that exact person and not just the community at large. Think about it. Any way you can tap into relevance starts to make that story more attractive, more readily apparent for that person to actually want to care to listen to. So don't just tell your story everywhere, tell it in a way that actually matters to people. And lastly, I'd remind you that you don't dictate your brand image. You might think you can generate it, but at the end of the day, the brand image is decided by the customers. You might think you're premium. If they don't, you're not. You might think you're fast. If they think you're slow, you're slow. So you have to try to tap into how do I present myself, but also how the customer's reacting to that. They own the brand image, so that relationship you develop with them and how you actually serve them is what defines your brand image. So again, very simple. If you want to take care of that brand image, be findable everywhere, tell your story, make it relevant to each customer, listen to the customer, and then listen to the customer some more and more and more. And that should help you come up with ways and conversations and new approaches, anything that'll help you refine, take steps forward with your brand image. I hope that helps. Hope it's a little bit of advice that you hadn't thought of. If it was, I'd love to hear from you as to what you would add to the story. Add your comments, add your feeds, find ways to share if you liked it. I appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in.